Hello and welcome to China Dispatches, the official podcast of the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing the position paper 2021-2022, the European Chamber's most important annual publication, our advocacy Bible. I'm going to be joined by the European Chamber President Jörg Wuttke, the National Chair of the ICT Working Group Chen, and the National Chair of the Energy Working Group Xu Zhonghua. And we'll be digging into some of the details from the position paper and what the implications could be for our members. The position paper is the European Chamber's most important annual publication, and it lays the foundation for all of our advocacy actions for the coming year. It's a bottom-up publication driven by our 35 working groups and sub-working groups, and it's compiled over a 6-month period. Each paper is made up of several key recommendations which provide an industry concern, a detailed assessment of the situation, and an actionable items for solving the issue. Many of these recommendations are extremely detailed and specific, and this year our working groups came up with a staggering 930 of them. The report also includes an executive position paper, which is the Chamber's philosophical look at the business environment in China, in which we try to pinpoint the broader economic and political trends that are impacting the development, trajectory, and composition of China's economy, and how European companies are being or could soon be impacted, as well as the effect they may have on China's growth prospects. In previous years, we've covered such topics as China's overall reform progress, the influence of state-owned enterprises in China's economy, and the costs of decoupling. This year, we dive into China's 14th five-year plan. Today, I'm joined by Jörg Wuttke, Chen, and Xu. Jörg, if you could just introduce yourself and your position in the Chamber.
Well, I'm one of the founding fathers of the Chamber. In 2000, I've been president 2 times already. Now I'm in my 3rd term heading this organization.
And Caroline?
My name is Chen. I'm the ICT chair of the working group, and I have been working with the group for 6-7 years.
And finally, Zhonghua.
Good morning. I'm Xu. I'm national chair for Energy Working Group, and before that, I have been national chair for R&D Working Group.
Thanks very much for taking the time to join me today to discuss the European Chamber's position paper 2021-2022. Jörg, to begin with, what's the most important message of this year's executive position paper?
Well, let me first state that this year it was a real challenge because our lead pen, Jacob Günther, went to Germany. So I'm really grateful, Carl, that you basically took the lead and we could get a great narrative going. 930 points, how do you find the common denominator is a real challenge. So for me, it was important to actually pinpoint the fact that China might be turning inward, what it does to the economy, what it does to us in business. The word for it is self-reliance. And we have been very privileged, basically, to have data sets from the World Bank that proven that self-reliance would be very costly. And so the basic message of this executive summary is like, yes, we're doing good business in China, but actually China now is punching below its weight.
But doesn't it make sense that, the COVID pandemic highlighted the fragility of global supply chains? Doesn't self-reliance make sense to a certain extent?
Well, I can politically understand the urge for self-reliance because, there is obviously a China-US trade war. China feels vulnerable. The fact that Huawei and ZTE have been taken out basically sent a message into China that actually they might be very good in the service sector, but they're really having a challenge in the manufacturing sector. But again, to reinvent the wheel, to do stuff, everything in China, which actually can be done greener, cleaner, and much cheaper outside China is something that is a worry. China's success over the last 20 years was just based on the fact that they got away from self-reliance into globalization. So the urge from the European business community is basically stay there. Just some areas maybe you want to sort of make sure it's in the fold of China. But overall, self-reliance costs money and it comes up with a lower growth trajectory.
So what are some of the ways that European companies are being affected by China's push for increased self-reliance?
Well, there's an upside and a downside. The upside of self-reliance is that all of a sudden areas that have been pretty much closed to foreign business or have been very constrained opened up. My own company is now able to put up a $10 billion investment in Guangdong. Before this disaster with ZTE, unthinkable. China wants chemicals, wants manufacturing in the marketplace. But again, at the same time, the downside is obviously that once it's within onshoring in China, then it might be less needed as an import. And then the other downside clearly is decarbonization. If you want to do everything yourself, you basically agree that you need a lot of more energy than someone else who has maybe water power. We have this example of aluminum. Why does China need to produce so much aluminum? 80% of the cost is electricity, where neighboring Russia has basically aluminum produced on a water hydropower facility. So there are many angles to this one, but overall, I think it's also made clear that the European business is eager to stay in the market here. The biggest risk is not to be in China.
Caroline, are you observing a trend of increased self-reliance in the ICT sector? And what are some of the policies that appear to be aimed at increasing self-reliance, and what the impact may be for European companies? So not just in the ICT sector, but also those that rely upon European ICT providers.
The trend of self-reliance is definitely true in almost every sector, but very strong in ICT as well. We take self-reliance as a philosophy. I haven't seen very detailed laws and regulation to fully penetrate such philosophy yet, but we are concerned on this trend. In some of the regulations, such as the data protection law or the definition of CII, we do see some of the traces of self-reliance. And one step deeper into standards, we also see a strong trend of this coming up. But however, we do need to differentiate self-reliance from self-sufficiency. I thought there could be a big misunderstanding of our position. For our understanding, we do want to get into constructive dialogue for developing laws, regulations, commenting laws and regulations, as well as developing the standards in order to promote the local economy. However, we do see this trust appearing up of the horizon, and this will definitely hurt our competition in the local market, as well as preventing innovation, because we believe we are still bringing the world-class leading technology into the Chinese market, and in this way we profit. And also we co-win with our partners. And we do hope that China will steer away from self-sufficiency. But we do understand the self-reliance policies and concepts. Actually, there are similar trends also globally. For example, in Europe, we also see the coming up of CHIP Act, and those are similar concepts to the Chinese self-reliance. And we are not against this concept, but we are concerned how extreme the interpretation of the concept could be, especially in our ICT sector.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that there is a crossover between self-reliance and self-sufficiency, and a certain amount of self-reliance is understandable. In fact, in certain areas, for example, medical devices, pharmaceuticals, and what we saw during the COVID pandemic was that a shortage of these of goods really causes security problems for countries and health problems. So I think self-reliance at that level is understandable, but it's when it increases to the point where it reaches, like you say, self-sufficiency, and that's when markets start to close off and they produce everything that they need for themselves. Zhonghua, are you seeing any signs of China becoming increasingly self-reliant in the energy sector, and how does that take shape?
Okay, for energy sector, I think we can look at this topic on two sides. On one side, China is a country heavily rely on fossil energy still today, and 70% of its oil rely on importation. and 40% of its gas rely on importation. So when China move from coal to gas, we can expect that more and more gas will be imported. So for this point of view, I would say China will increase its reliance on the foreign importation. But on the other side, when President Xi said that China aiming to build up a renewable electricity-oriented power supply system, then China has a big competence, a lot of experience for the renewable industry. So we can see that on the way to the carbon neutrality or energy transition, China will improve its self-independence energy supply. So I think this is a two way we look at this topic. But I would also mention another topic that it's a technological competence. I think we European business can share a lot of experience. We have a lot of good case in European side for the clean energy supply or energy digitalization. So China will rely, I think, a little bit more on some European experience. We can work with China to explore the market. So I think it's a different angle. We can see on some area the reliance is not so strong, and on other side the reliance is increased.
Based on what we've seen of the 14th five-year plan so far, the overarching plan rather than the industry-specific ones, and looking at the results from our business confidence survey, do you think there are certain industries that will benefit more in the next, say, 10 to 15 years? Or are we just thinking about those companies that are more willing to completely onshore into China that will have the best results?
Well, one interesting part of the 14th five-year plan was actually that China is not emphasizing the development of the service sector anymore. It's a clear shift towards manufacturing, which benefits us a great deal, but at the same time puts a lot of heavy burden on the power sector. As you just see, the power shortage is actually emphasizing that China is possibly not ready yet to do all the manufacturing it anticipates. The winners will be those that are helping China to become carbon neutral. The winners will be those that actually help China to leapfrog in technologies, because China is very vulnerable, and it's very interesting to see that 40% of all technologies that China imports is coming from Europe. So we are player number one by far by helping China to upgrade. But for upgrading and by complying with the 14th five-year plan, we need openness. We need engagement. We need a fair level fair playing field, which in many areas we don't have. So I would say manufacturing outlook pretty good. When it comes to services, as Caroline just eloquently put, lots of challenges, lots of security issues, by Chinese reflected by American or by European elsewhere, and still in some other areas, logistics and lawyers and whatnot. It's going to be really, really tough, which is a pity, because the service sector is the one where Europe has a lot to offer. We are selling 5 times more services to the US than to China, and both economies have the same size, so it must be something wrong with the Chinese openness and not with our abilities.
With the focus on environment in the 14th five-year plan, and from what we hear from our members, that they need to be able to get into the market, they need to be able to share their expertise in order to help China move forward and meet its goals, there's going to have to be some kind of balance that's being struck there. So Zhonghua, looking at the 2030, 2060 goals, what do you think some of the opportunities and challenges are going to be for European companies?
There will be huge opportunity for European energy business in China. For example, when China is moving from coal to gas, European side, there are many leading European energy giants. They can provide a lot of solution or product for the gas business. And also, we have European business have a leading competence on the energy digitalization or heating, or we are very good for some new concept to developing the clean energy system. So on this domain, I think European business has a lot of opportunity. But on the other side, we can see that China is already very good, or on some cases, they are leading for the renewable business. For example, for solar, for wind, China is very good at cost and efficiency. So we face a big challenge. So it's really depending on how we manage our strategy in China. I would stress that we need to build up our strategy in China to be more proactive, or to be part of this ecosystem in China. Then we may transform or challenge into opportunity.
Just to continue on that, from the discussions that you've had so far, are you optimistic about being able to expand, being able to bring the technology that China needs?
Yes, we could offer a lot of technological solution, but on the other side, we need always be careful for IPR. So we need to design a more suitable strategy. But I think we should not always be too conservative because of some IPR concern in China. Then we stop to be more proactive. Indeed, we need to be very clear about the evolution of what happened in China, including IPR, including some business opportunity.
Just sticking with the topic of energy, during summer, some of our member companies in South China, in Guangdong province, reported power outages, which meant that they had to cease production. And this has now become more common through other provinces throughout China. We're seeing over the last month, this has happened more and more, and we're expecting it to continue for an unspecified period of time. Zhonghua and Jörg as well, do you think this is related to the 14th Five-Year Plan and its focus on decarbonization, or are there other issues at play here?
Yes, I think it's linked to the 2030 or 2016 plan or the 14th Five-Year Plan. Indeed, for Energy Working Group, we are always calling to be a good balance between energy security and carbon emission. So this is two topics we could not leave each other. Otherwise, there will be some big issue like what happened today. And we are also calling Chinese authority to implement some reform which are more market mechanism oriented. For example, for the situation today, if China, I think it's a call for China to speed up the reform on some electricity pricing. This is very important. The case happened today is more complicated. We are also seeing when we are speed up too quickly from the fossil energy to the renewable energy, and there will be some issue for the energy supply. There will be some issue for the unbalance for the energy supply and the energy demand. This is the cause for the situation today. For the European energy business, we have a lot of solution. I think we can help China to build up a more solid competence on the clean energy system, and we can provide some low carbon solution, for example, gas supply or even decarbonization of a gas supply. So this is something we need to work together with China. And on the other side, I think China needs to be more proactive to speed up some innovation. Innovation not only for technology, it's innovation for business model, innovation for mindset. This is very important. I would say China needs to have a systematic solution to manage this challenge.
Jörg, we've seen this kind of extreme measures employed before. If we think back to 3-4 years ago with the blue sky policy that came out, and we saw a number of local authorities rushing to try and meet their targets, and they took some fairly extreme measures then. Is this a similar case that we're seeing now?
No, actually, that was more regional, and I would say now we witness a clash of ecology versus economy. And the 14th Five-Year Plan actually does matter because Xi Jinping's target of peaking at 2030, let alone be carbon neutral 2060, actually was not really reflected in the 14th Five-Year Plan, how to get there. And I think that possibly laid a foundation of now panic movements and policies that might not be proper. Again, 2030 peak clearly signaled to the coal industry, why should we invest more in coal mines? Why don't we just let it go and have less and less coal on the marketplace? Then they had this diplomatic spat with the Australians where they stopped importing coal. And then it's bad luck on top of it. No rain in the southwest, no wind in the north, an unprecedented increase in Chinese industrial productivity because the world is coming back on stream. And the factory of the world is China, so that needs a lot of energy. And now we are in a situation where basically we are stranded. And the problem we have is, of course, that it has not been really communicated. There's no pre-warning. We don't know where it's going to hit us next and how long it's going to be. And it must be very embarrassing for the leadership to see that the whole supply chains are going out. The impact on GDP will be serious. again, with the backdrop of a very strong economic performance, so maybe they can afford it at this stage. But the energy situation clearly outlines that China needs a coordinated plan of bringing in renewables. What they've done so far was simply not good enough.
One of the other points that we focus on in the position paper this year is China's increasing push for technology localization through various policies. For example, what we see is happening in the banking sector. And also that it's trying to increase its manufacturing capacity in key technologies so that it reduces its reliance on other countries. What do you think the European companies will need to do to adjust their current strategies to deal with these kind of changes? And do you think that there is a danger that the technology localization policies may end up forcing some companies out of the Chinese market?
From our ICT working group point of view, we don't see the chance of hitting the exit button. But in our business survey, we do every year show strong confidence in the Chinese business. I cannot remember the numbers by heart. Maybe Jörg can give you some hint later. We do see there should be increasing investment in the Chinese market for many of our ICT companies. As Jörg mentioned, that we have a lot to offer, not only for ICT services, but also for equipments and other products. We are the world leading technology providers in China. We are confident to do business with our partners and to steer up the competition in order to bring more innovation in the market. My suggestion for the European companies would be, number one, continue to engage in the constructive dialogue with the authorities for regulation commenting and making process. And we have been doing that in the past many years very actively. That's a good track. Another suggestion will be to put more investment into the standardization making process. Actually, we all know that a lot of the policies can only be materialized in the standardization process. And I do see a lack of investment for a lot of European companies in this area. We need to pick up the speed a little bit. Last but not least, we always need to encourage the European and Chinese dialogue on the global transfer of data, because for our ICT industry, out of our nature, we need this free flow, relatively free flow of data globally. And in that aspect, we do need to work together, not only with the Chinese authorities, but also the European authorities. That's my 3 pieces of advice.
I think that's another excellent point on standardization. Whereas Europe used to be a leader in standardization, it was a real strength for them. China has edged forwards partly through the investment in standardization activities, but also in the coordinated approach that they have. And our recommendations now is to the EU is to take this more seriously. And we'll be releasing another report on standardization in early December, and we hope that message will be got across. Just turning to the China, EU, US triangle, Jörg, EU is often seen as a bystander at best and a lapdog to the US at worst. I don't think this is necessarily true, but that's the general perception. So what do you think the EU needs to do to change the perception? And what do you think will come to define the EU's relationships and how it wants to engage with both the US and China in the years to come?
Well, China definitely is in the G2 mode, meaning the US is their partner and everybody else is second best. And even the economic superpower like Europe is falling off the radar there, which is a great pity. I think that China underestimates the importance of Europe as a partner as well as a marketplace. Yes, in policy making, actually, there's always the assumption that decisions are taken in the White House and not in the Elysee or in the Chancellor's office in Berlin. And that's a great pity. And a misjudgment, actually, also that very important decisions are being taken in our parliaments, if our governments like it or not. And China just cannot focus on our parliaments, which is in their concept not really that important, hence misjudgment about the importance of Europe. And Europe can be only can only blame themselves also. We are notoriously in our disunity. We actually have always some country moving out of the group, be it Hungary, be it Cyprus. That, of course, weakens the stance of Europe. At the same time, China has been actively trying to divide Europe with 16+1. We have to be more united, and we have to be better in how we react to China. The Commission made it quite proper by saying China is a partner, they are a competitor, but also a rival. But a rival is something you can lament about, or you can actually get your act together. And so for me, it always, when I talk to European decision makers, Europe can only be taken serious by China if we take ourselves serious. And hence, we have to not only talk about reforms, we have to implement reforms.
So by and large, again, going back to our BCS earlier in the year, European companies are doing well in the Chinese market. The size and potential of the market are undeniable, and they have to remain here to stay relevant as global players. Yet, if we look at the recent trends that we're all acknowledging of China turning a little bit more inwards, it means that basically investors are going to have an increasingly sophisticated view of China to really identify where the opportunities are going to lie. So a final question for all of you. What would your advice be to a company either looking to enter China or to expand its existing investment at this time? Zhonghua, start with you.
Yes, I have 3 points for this question. And I think the first one is for any European business, the crucial to be successful is to have an excellent team. So we should have good people who know this market, know the culture, and also know the global strategy of your company. And second one, I think we should be more proactive to create an ecosystem which integrating different stakeholders. And maybe this ecosystem should be not only domestic and also international. So this is very much important. And third suggestion is, I think we need to be more innovative. More innovative not only to build our leading technological competence, and also more innovative for our business strategy, business model, and even for the mindset. So this is very important. I think the world is changing very fast, so we should change ourselves to match the evolution speed of this world.
And Caroline?
I would like to give 3 pieces of advice. First, be cautious. Always stay fully compliant. Secondly, be bold. Always push the Chinese government for more openness. Last but not least, be practical. You need to engage fully, not only looking at sales numbers, but also invest in R&D, invest in standards to be engaged fully.
And finally, Jörg.
Well, being head of a manufacturing company here, I would only say if you enter the Chinese market, you have to enter with the latest, the best technologies. As a matter of fact, you have to push the envelope. Because China is the demand story, China gives you the opportunity to actually implement manufacturing processes that you might not find possible anywhere else in the world because of lack of demand. So in a way, if you enter, it has to be the latest and the best. And if you have an IPR problem with that one, then think again if you want to stay in that business or you move it close to China. But it's very important, otherwise you're simply not competitive. Zhonghua definitely put it right. The team is very important. We have to get the messages from our demanding customers. There is a very sophisticated middle class. We need salespeople that know their market, know their people. We have to have a very good response rate that actually we can translate then into other global markets. I'll give you an example. The average Mercedes-Benz buyer in Germany is 53, and in China it happens to be 35. So you have a very different demand for gadgets and electronics in the car. You have a lot of Chinese salespeople in Mercedes that pick up that message. They evolve it here, but then you also need very good diversity. You need international marketing managers and experts in China to pick that up and translate it to the headquarters. We cannot let our operations in China become a silo, and we are running this danger that we become less and less expat heavy. And also China is a fitness club for our managers. You know, my company, we view a stint in China as absolutely vital to get the China bug, the kind of we can do stuff. And so a complete localization would lead to the death of that kind of know-how transfer. then we have to try to define problems and don't sugarcoat it. China is not all rosy and wonderful. If you don't define the problems and don't basically declare how you want to address them, then it's all your own problem, really. It is something which is very well done in the European Chamber. So, of course, if you want to enter the Chinese market, you have to be a member of the European Chamber first and foremost. But also we have to now stronger look into the license to operate. I mean, we are caught in the act between the US, Europe, and China. They have different preconditions, sanctions here, export ban there, and you definitely have to broaden your understanding of where you end up in between. Otherwise, it's going to be really, really costly to be either someone breaking American sanctions or ending up on the Chinese unreliable list. So in a way, it's the biggest risk is not to be in China, but you have to be here smart.
So be bold but cautious. Jörg, Caroline, and Zhonghua, thanks very much for joining us today and sharing your views.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful.
Thanks very much for joining us here on China Dispatches, and thanks once again to our guests Jörg Wuttke, Caroline Chen, and Zhonghua Xu. I'd also like to thank my colleague Gao Rei for all of her work behind the scenes on the podcast. The position paper was launched on the 23rd of September and is available for download from our website at www.europeanchamber.com.cn. I've been your host, Carl Hayward. Thanks very much for listening.